What happens when you bring a legend into a locker room and for one night, the legend looks human? Lights, prime time, the city expecting a sermon. Aaron Rodgers walks out like a man who has answered every question before it's asked. He's the insurance policy, the headline, the reason people paid extra for Sunday night. And then the game starts, and for the first time in a while, the story isn't about a miracle. It's about a meltdown that throws fuel on a season already smelling a little like a dumpster fire. You remember Pitt. Pittsburgh rolled the dice. Omar erased play it safe boardroom logic and said, "We're done treading water. We want big swings." And the biggest swing was Rodgers, four-time MVP, a brain of football, a man who can calm storms with a single call. That felt like a cultural reset. It felt like a reset that could cover a dozen small sins. A shaky offensive line, a receiver core that needs a number one, a coaching staff still trying to figure out its best chess pieces. For a time, it worked. The vet brought poise. The veterans in that locker room straightened their backs. But greatness isn't a single trade. It's a season-long audit, and on Sunday night, the ledger opened with ink you can't wash out. The first quarter was a slow drip of worry. Missed timing, a sack here, a penalty there. Little things that usually get papered over by late-game wizardry. Then came that image you can't unsee. Rodgers, chased, retreating again, trapped in his own end zone, then pulled down for a safety. Khalil Mack made the play, the refs made the call, and suddenly the stadium felt older than it was. A safety in prime time is a punctuation mark. It's not just 2 points, it's a line the narrative can't cross out. It makes announcers whisper and fans check their phones for trade rumors. It makes a quarterback who's earned every right to command the room look a little small. Numbers will tell the clinical part of the story. 16 of 31, 161 yards, 2 interceptions, a passer rating that looked like a relic instead of a resume highlight. But numbers are tidy things. They don't show the way his shoulders sagged after a missed third down look. They don't show the millisecond he stared off the field as if trying to remember the blueprint for a game he's run 1,000 times. The louder truth is in the pauses. The offensive line folding under pressure, receivers losing the rhythm that years of timing usually preserve, and a playbook that looked like it had left its confidence at home. Maybe the cruelest thing about watching Rodgers struggle is remembering what he's been. This is not a man learning to play. This is a legend whose body is reminding him that the game keeps time, whether you ask it to slow down or not. Age doesn't kill skill, but it narrows margin. At 42, Rodgers' magic hasn't vanished. It's simply more expensive to buy. You need better protection, crisper routes, and a coaching staff willing to hide weakness behind smarter play calling. On Sunday, none of those buffers held steady, and Pittsburgh's choices come into focus. The team didn't trade the deadline like a banker in love. It kept faith in internal fixes and veteran steadiness. That kind of patience is noble and also risky. When you add an aging maestro to a roster that still has holes, you're buying minutes of grace, not guaranteed structural change. Rodgers can lift an offense, but he can't be its scaffolding. He can be the artist who turns a decent painting into a masterpiece, if the frame's already solid. I want you to picture a locker room after that kind of loss. The faces aren't theatrical, they're raw. Veterans who trusted a narrative now worry it was an illusion. Coaches feel the weight of every unmade call. Young players watch their leader and wonder whether confidence is contagious or fragile. Rodgers walks in carrying both responsibility and a private ledger he'll study alone. That's the real wreckage. Confidence is a muscle. It tears and heals in practice, but a public night like this makes the tear visible. Let's be honest. Rodgers also brought something this team desperately needed: standards. The way he studies, the way he expects crispness at the line, the way he conducts meetings, those are contagious. That's why there's gratitude in the room, even on a night that feels like a setback. But gratitude won't fix protection schemes that fold on third down or receivers who fail to win a 50-50 route when the score says we need it. The team still needs architects, not just a conductor. You can't win a season with demonstrations of professionalism alone. So what does Pittsburgh do from here? There's a temptation to dramatize. Bench him, pivot, trade, start a youth movement. That would be spectacle, not strategy. The sober path is harder. Evaluate. Are the sacks the result of schematic failure or execution collapse? Does this offensive line need reinforcements, or does the play calling need to get the ball out faster? Can you create a pocket with motion and quick reads that protect Rodgers' limitations without neutering his ability to make plays? Those are roster and coaching questions that require patience, some require pans, something the fan base earns only through results. There is also a lesson about boldness and responsibility. Khan's aggressive posture deserves credit. He didn't buy into stasis. But big swings have two parts: the bet and the supporting cast. Bringing Rodgers in was only the opening move. The next moves have to be about construction, pieces that extend the QB's shelf life, the sort of tactical fixes that make late-game heroics unnecessary because the offense just hums. That's not sexy, but it's the work that turns a gambler's risk into a championship blueprint. Here's the hard-to-swallow truth. Legends age. That's not tragedy. It's part of sports poetry. What matters is how an organization honors that arc by catching lightning and then building storm shelters around it. Rodgers can still make plays that feel like miracles. He can still carry this team on shoulders that have carried wonders. But he can't do it alone, and maybe he never was supposed to. Pittsburgh's bigger job isn't to ask him to be superhuman. It's to give him a team that's humanly capable of meeting primetime's demand. The final act of this story is still being written. A meltdown doesn't kill a season. It clarifies it. It makes the soft places show. It asks questions managers can't dodge. Do you double down on coaching, on line help, on weapons? Or do you treat this as proof that a Band-Aid was never the plan? The answer will show itself in the weeks to come, in how this front office moves, how coaches adjust, and how Rodgers responds when the lights come back on. So when you think about that night, the safety, the sacks, the passer rating that reads worse than it felt, remember this: greatness is not a single game. It's a series of reckonings. Aaron Rodgers' worst night was a loud one, but it didn't write the final paragraph. Pittsburgh's season won't be judged by one meltdown. It will be judged by what happens next. Do they rebuild around a man, or do they build a team that makes a man look immortal? And if you want the image you'll carry away, imagine Rodgers walking off the field, helmet tucked, shoulders heavy but not broken, looking at the stadium as if already drafting the counterpunch. That's not a man defeated. That's a man giving you a deadline. The question is whether the rest of the city will meet it. By the book, that was roughing the passer. By the eye test, most of us saw a textbook sack. Dallas Turner beats his man, wraps Lamar Jackson, and finishes the tackle. The whistle changed a near 53-yard desperation attempt into a 30-yard chip shot at the end of the half, and the Ravens walked into the locker room trailing 10-9 instead of down by a longer margin. That tiny swing of points is why the clip blew up. The rule the refs enforced is explicit. Defenders can't land with all or most of their body weight on a passer or stuff him into the ground. The league trains crews to look not just at the initial contact, but at how a tackle finishes. If a defender's momentum carries him on top of the quarterback and it appears he lands with body weight, that can be a flag, even when the contact started as a clean wrap. Officials call what the rule describes. Viewers react to what they see in context. That tension, letter of the rule versus spirit of the play, is the NFL's recurring headache. Safety and optics push the league to protect the passer. Competitive integrity and the natural flow of tackling push back. The practical effect is that defenders are coached to finish to the side or to peel off, but doing that consistently at game speed is hard. The defender's job is to secure the tackle. The rule asks him to moderate how he does it. Under pressure, those two goals collide. There are cleaner ways to reduce the outrage without gutting the protection standard. First, define a measurable finish. Instead of vague language about most of the defender's weight, the league could adopt a quantifiable frame. For example, sustained torso contact exceeding half a second, or clear chest-on-chest compression that forces the quarterback's torso downward. Second, allow a limited replay check on end-of-half penalties that materially alter scoring opportunities. A one-time fast replay on those flags would trade a little clock for a lot of legitimacy. Third, train and publish visual standards so crews call like for like across weeks. Consistency beats justification after the fact. None of this removes the reality that collisions are violent and messy. Players will always argue for letting defenders play and for treating QBs like football players, not porcelain. The league will always say protecting health is non-negotiable. The answer won't please everyone. But clarity, consistency, and a narrow replay safety valve would at least close the gap between that looked clean and that's clearly a foul. Tonight's call sat in the gap, defensible under the book, enraging by instinct. And until the NFL tightens how it measures finish, we'll keep having the same argument. Expectations were high when Aaron Rodgers signed in Pittsburgh. Veteran leadership, a steady hand, and an instant nudge toward contention. For stretches this year, he delivered parts of that promise. Sunday night, though, was the kind of performance that forces reality back into the conversation. Under pressure, short on mobility, and mistake-prone at the worst possible times. Rodgers' stat line, middling completions, 2 interceptions, and a passer rating in the 50s, is ugly enough. The safeties and sacks that turned into a safety themselves told the deeper story. The pocket collapsed repeatedly, timing evaporated, and an offense that leaned on short, high-percentage throws couldn't find traction. At 42, Rodgers still processes the game at a phenomenal level. What an aging elite QB can't reliably provide anymore is the extra scramble, the improvisational escape that turns near sacks into extra yards. That physical limit matters when the offensive line and weapons don't compensate. But this isn't only Aaron Rodgers' problem. The Steelers' roster construction and in-season passivity are part of the equation. You don't sign a Hall of Famer and then leave him exposed behind a line that can't sustain contact. The team did not materially change its receiving core or pass pro at the deadline, and the result was predictable. Rodgers facing pressure he can't always buy time to solve. Coaching and scheme must adapt. Quicker drops, more two-step timing routes, and schematic protections that reduce the need for Rodgers to escape instead of throw. What's the organizational choice now? If Pittsburgh keeps Rodgers because his leadership and game management still elevate the team on better weeks, the front office must immediately prioritize protecting him and adding playmakers who create easy, high-value reads. If the team decides Rodgers is no longer the long-term answer, that pivot needs to be clear and decisive in the offseason, not a mid-season panic. Either path requires honest evaluation. This was a bad night, and the franchise should treat it as diagnostic, not as an outlier to paper over. Finally, give credit where it's due. Rodgers hasn't been a sunk cost. He's renewed the locker room's professionalism. But leadership can't cover a porous line and inconsistent playmakers forever. The Steelers' next moves should be surgical. Shore up protection, inject vertical threat or separation into the receiver room, and scheme to get Rodgers quick, decisive throws. Age is immutable. Roster design is not. If Pittsburgh wants to contend with Rodgers under center, they must build a team that does more of the physical work he used to shoulder. If they keep waiting for magic, Sunday's meltdown will feel less like an isolated bad night and more like a season trend.